שלום עידו.
שלום אליאנה.
שלום לכם וברוכים הבאים לפודקאסט שלנו רגע לפני.
היום, בפרק הראשון שלנו באנגלית, אנחנו שמחים לארח את פרנצ'סקה אלבנזה, הדווחית המיוחדת מטעם האו"ם לשטחים הפלסטינים הכבושים.
נדבר איתה על הסיפור האישי שלה עם ישראל ופלסטין, על השפעתו האמיתית של האו"ם בפוליטיקה הבינלאומית, על הלחצים שמופעלים על ידי ממשלת ישראל ואלו התומכות בה בכדי להשתיק קולות של ביקורת, ועל איך היא חוותה את זה בעצמה. נדבר על הטענה לרצח עם בעזה, על המשמעות של שינוי בינלאומי שכבר מתחולל כמפתח להשגת צדק לפלסטינים, ועל היכולת של אקטיביזם להביא לשינוי אמיתי. Hello, Francesca Albanese. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, shalom, Eliana and Edo, and thank you for having me with you.
This is the first time we're recording a podcast in English. Normally we're speaking Hebrew with all our guests. And usually we start by the guest introducing himself. And I think in your case it would be especially interesting because in the international scene you're very well known and very important for the discussion about Palestine and especially since the 7th of October. And we have a feeling that a lot of our listeners who live in Israel don't really know you well enough. So if you wouldn't mind, say a few words about yourself, your history with Israel and Palestine, and what is your position for the UN, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm glad to do that because frankly, I do agree with you that probably most Israelis do not know me because there is an insulation of Israelis to what happens outside at the UN, but also there is so much animosity that has been directed at me, and I understand why the Israeli government has done all it could to paint me as a monster, as someone who hates Israel, which is absolutely not true. And but again, I would understand why someone listening to this podcast and having heard my name before would start with a bit of sense of caution. So let's start with who I am. So I'm an Italian lawyer, Southern Italian, very proud Southern Italian, and I've been appointed by the Human Rights Council, which is the part of the UN dealing with human rights, sitting in Geneva, as the Special Rapporteur on the Occupied Palestinian Territories. So the land, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, that Israel militarily occupied in 1967 and that has been occupied ever since. So this mandate has been there for 33 years now, and I'm the 8th Special Rapporteur, the first woman serving in this capacity. And also I often make the joke, and the first one having hair, because all my predecessors are bald. This what does this, it's not a job because it's pro bono. So I'm a lawyer who's voluntarily serving the United Nations, and of course this assignment is very prestigious, but it comes at a cost, because at a huge personal cost. Anyway, that I do that with great honor. I wouldn't say pleasure these days, but with great honor and sense of responsibility. So I'm mandated to investigate and report the violations of international law committed by Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. And people start saying, oh, you see, you're biased because you only look at violations committed by Israel. Guys, this mandate was created before the Palestinian Authority existed. And Israel, like it or not, has been the occupying power in the occupied Palestinian territory, clearly committing some violations of international law. Think of the settlements. The settlements are violations of international law. I know that people might resent this, but this is the beauty of international law. There are the facts, you apply the law, and here's the result. However, despite this, I made a point when I became a special rapporteur. I said, I want to be different from my predecessors because while I want to continue to have thorough investigations and thematic investigations, which make people understand what is beyond the chronicling of the violations, meaning during this period, this is the number of Palestinians and Israelis being killed or maimed, or these are the home destroyed, these are the instances of war. I wanted to get out of that. And I wanted to get into the analysis, so to help people understand why this has become the most protracted conflict in modern history. Is that intractable? Absolutely not. I think that this is really resolvable, but we need to look outside of the close confinement that has been given. So what I said when I became a special rapporteur is that I want to focus on broader issues. And this is why I've been focusing on the question of self-determination, apartheid, how children are treated, why there is so much arrest and detention of Palestinians, looking at the carcerality that the Israeli army imposes, but not just the Israeli army, it's the occupation that imposes. And my findings have been used at the international level. I mean, they've been also part and parcel of how the International Court of Justice has managed to understand the occupation. You know, there is we can go back to this later, but the occupation as a whole has been deemed unlawful by the International Court. And of course, lately I've become the chronicler of the genocide. I'm among those who believe that Israel has committed acts of genocide in the Gaza Strip, and I'm happy to talk about that. In this context, and with this I will conclude. Of course, I've touched the nerve, the most sensitive nerve in Israel, and I've been accused of being an anti-Semite, an anti-Israeli, a Jew hater, an Israel hater, supporter of terrorism, connected to Hamas. All these are lies and fabrications, and I understand why these are necessary, because I'm accusing Israel of committing crimes and the United States and Germany to be complicit. So of course they don't like me. But hey, I want to really, my hope, and I do believe that that place will be the most enchanting and amazing place while it will be apartheid free. I mean, the land that many call Israel, many call Palestine, doesn't matter how we call it. May this be a place of love other than perpetual conflict and domination.
Okay, Francesca, if you don't mind, before we go into the real topic of Israel and Palestine and the Gaza and the genocide, because you mentioned everything we would like to speak about later, there is kind of a notion right now, or a kind of frustration among many people that once again the UN has exposed itself as an organization who in some ways doesn't really have the ability to fulfill its supposed mission. And I wanted to ask, or we wanted to ask, what if you can tell us a short introduction, if you can give us a short introduction about the real influence which this institution actually has on issues of human rights and political diplomacy, international diplomacy. If you can give us maybe an example where this potential was actually being fulfilled, maybe in different cases, and maybe we can, and then we can speak a little bit about the difference to the Israel-Palestinian case.
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, I agree with those who have a critical view of the United Nations. I mean, since the very beginning of this latest assault, which of course started with the escalation of the violence against the Palestinians, started with the atrocities that were committed on October 7. There is much that is known about that day, and we don't need to delve into the gruesome details, but there is a lot that is not known or scrutinized enough. And it's how Israel has not protected Israeli citizens, how Israel has created, especially in the past 20 years, has created the conditions for perpetual insecurity for the Israeli people, I mean, these Jewish Israelis, and how we got here, how it has exploited really the tragedy of October 7 for so many to turn this into 360 degrees destructive war to advance a political gain, which is ethnic cleansing of Palestine, of what remains of the Palestinians. So in the face of this, I have criticized the United Nations myself as an independent expert of the United Nations, and I've not been the only one, saying the United Nations has failed clamorously in three possible ways. First of all, Israel continues to claim that this is self-defense. By no means this is self-defense, because self-defense under international law is a term of art and has clear boundaries. International law self-defense can be invoked to protect a state against war from another state. So this is the legitimate use of force, of war in international arena. Now, Gaza, I understand that Hamas has posed a huge security risk, a huge security threat for Israel. I understand that the attack on October 7 had to be repelled and the hostages had to be freed. The point is that a war is not something that is in Israel's toolkit if Israel wants to respect international law, because this is an occupied territory and you cannot wage a war against an occupied territory, being the Gaza Strip or being the West Bank or else. And so the UN has never had the courage to, other than through its independent experts, to say, no, my friends, this is not this is not self-defense. And in any case, even if you had self-defense, even if you had a legitimate reason to conduct a war, this is not the way to conduct a war. There is the principle of distinction of civilians and non-civilians. There is a principle of protecting civilian objects, being proportionate in the military action, and to take precautions. Nothing of this has been done, and I'm afraid that the Israelis, who are intoxicated by the government-led propaganda, are not fully aware of what has been done in their names, to a point, because in any case, the Israelis who have conducted these operations were Israeli soldiers. So they know what they've been doing. But the Palestinians have been so dehumanized that probably they don't see human beings while they shoot at a Palestinian woman, child on a wheelchair or standing on their own legs. So the principles of international law have not been asserted fully by the United Nations. This is the first thing. The second thing is that where is diplomacy? Where is diplomacy? The UN has not functioned as a diplomatic forum, which is meant to protect peace and security and stability for everyone. There has been an escalating war atmosphere in the region with exchange of fire between Israel and Lebanon and Yemen, and Israel bombing Iran and Yemen and Syria and Iraq, and destroying parts of Lebanon. So again, this has gone completely out of control. The second thing is, so no legal authority, no political authority, and more than anything else today is no humanitarian authority. Because how come that one member state can decide to starve, to shut down water, electricity, fuel to an entire people? If it's true that Gaza were not controlled by Israel, how come that Israel can shut down the sources of essential supplies without any possibility of the Palestinians to really to secure those supplies? And no one has the power to intervene. Why? And here's the crux of the matter. Today, what's happening to Palestine, to Israel, Palestine, is a revealer of a global order where the United Nations has never been a place of true equality. Of course, this is something that people in the global south know very well, because the international system you and I are talking about has never served them properly. But we Western people have always benefited from it. And now we see the risk of this system breaking, because the United States, which is so solidly into this with Israel, I'm against it. I mean, when people say Israel controls the United States, Absolutely not. This is the United States imperial politics and policies in the region. And Israelis are also used as pawns in this design, because the United States is far away, but we are here, you are there. I mean, this is our region. We should be able to protect it. So yes, the United Nations has registered the most epical failure of its history in the past 20 months. And this is the last point. It's 20 months that this situation is ongoing. And during this period, Israel might like it or not, but during this period, I've always advocated for the recognition and against the invisibilization of the Israelis, their pain, which has blinded many of them, but also how needed they are in seeing what is happening to their country. And today, I do see so many Israelis raising their head against this, raising their voice, standing, and I keep on saying this is the moment to unite all the struggles, and the rallying cry should be humanity. We are equal. We are human beings. We should protect each other's children. You know what I mean?
But Francesca, if I want to paint what you just said in a very dark light, you are actually saying the UN historically, and more than ever now in the Palestinian case, in this last almost 19, 20 months now, is not the place to search for a solution. We should find maybe new structures, new formations to try and act against this. This place you mentioned, American interest. They are meeting with Israeli interests. There's money involved. There's so much involved, but somehow with the Palestinians and Gaza right now, it exploded like in a way where all the truth has came out. As the UN is like it's a charade. So what could be done in the UN or outside the UN?
Thank you, Edo. Yes, my argument is radical, but let me qualify, because I'm not throwing the UN out of the window. I do want this revealing moment to be an eye-opener for people inside the UN and outside the UN, to make the system really equal, really universal, really at the service of the people and not the states only. Because states are not equal. While people should be equal, we know that states are not equal. So the United Nations has functions as a place where to advance improvement for human beings. Think that the decolonization process that has led most African countries to break the chains of European colonialism has happened, including through the United Nations. Think that apartheid South Africa eventually has been sanctioned by the United Nations. But eventually, do you see what I mean? Eventually, the boycott of apartheid South Africa started with a young lady, a young worker in a supermarket in Ireland, and she refused to pass South African fruits. She said, no, these are products of the apartheid. I can't. And she started a struggle and a strike that was joined by others. And little by little, by working with South Africans, Black South Africans, white South Africans against apartheid, the movement became universal, and even states at the United Nations level could not resist the pressure. And this is happening also now for Israel-Palestine. The tide is shifting. And they want the Israelis not to fear this moment, not to fear justice. I'm someone, this is why it's so unfortunate that I've been silenced so much in Israel. And this is something that has been intended, because I was telling you, as I became a special rapporteur, one of my goals was to open up for discussions with Jewish communities and Palestinian communities inside Israel and in the diaspora. This is what I've said. It's in the letter. This is in the public records. This is the letter I wrote to the United Nations in 2021 when I said, look, I would be I would be happy to take on this role together with others. And I was chosen. And I've started engaging since very early on with in unexpected parts of the Israeli societies, including I had Israeli friends who were saying, "Oh, you're really talking to quote unquote Zionist organizations." And I said, I talk to anyone. I don't have a stake in this. I've never been an activist. And if I knew what I know now, 10 years ago, of course I would have been an activist. But my coming into Palestine and Israel-Palestine has been really gradual and through an intellectual, through studies. Because when I was, of course, as an Italian, Israel-Palestine has always been very close. So, and this was, and I grew up at a time where Palestine was recognized as a struggle for liberation, and not at the expense of the Israelis. I remember the president of the republic, when I was 5-year-old, would say, the Israelis have had their state, the Palestinians need to have their state. Now I think we are a bit beyond that. But it's important, the recognition of the humanity of both people, of all people, which is completely obliterated in the public discourse, especially in Europe and the US right now. But this is why I'm saying I think that the Israelis do not have necessarily the perception of the power to change that they carry. In my view, for example, I was saying, as an Italian who has been raised on has been educated, because this is what my generation was exposed to, has been educated to what the Holocaust was. I know two things: that first of all, the Holocaust is not just about the means of elimination, and it's not about the gas chambers only. The Jewish people have been eliminated in Europe, have been targeted for extermination and so genocide, because they were the other inside us, among us, white Christian patriarchal societies. The Jews were they represented the other, that the colonized was outside of Europe. It was the other inside, among us, and we had to deal with it. And we dealt with it in a racist way, because this is 500 years of European history. We are imbued of racism, and the more we realize it, it's not only us Europeans. Racism is a global disease, but we have it. And as a European, I know that the genocide of the Jews would have not been possible without this racism, because it's not true that people didn't know what was happening to the Jews. Of course we knew. The Jews had been put in ghettos for centuries. How come? How come it was so easy to kick them out? In my country, they were kicked out of civil life through law of the states. So the lawyers knew, the jurists knew, the academics knew there are people who have been kicked out of university for standing for the Jews, as it happens today. So this is why I got furious when I'm prevented to talk about my history as a European who wants to do things different. And when I try to look at the only history that makes sense to understand what's happening to the Palestinians, I'm accused to be an anti-Semite. So this is why I'm saying, I've always said from the very beginning, the Israelis, of course, I've said, I totally understand why for many people, the creation of the State of Israel after the Holocaust was the only option, because the Jews remained unwanted in Europe and for years. So it was very convenient to have them out. Britain rejected boats with Holocaust survivors, and so Australia, and so the United States. There was no other place for them. So I understand the sense of fear that many Israelis have to be exterminated, because this is something that grows into your DNA, into your genes, and you need generations. But hey, here we are. We need to understand that the Israelis are, in fact, committing atrocities against another people, and not because they are a Hamas. Because the Palestinians have been projected as as an existential threat to the Israelis, as an existential threat to the Jews. This is awful. This is one of the most inhumane things in my current capacity and in my life I've heard translating into politics.
I think what is important to understand about the Israeli society, and what took me a long time to understand, and the podcast also helped me, is how deep the indoctrination of the Israeli people is for generations, from before even the founding of the State of Israel. So we are indoctrinated officially from kindergarten, school, of course, the army. My first vote in the army, I was extreme right, because we have to protect ourselves. Like I really made a shift in my life. Even now, I read stuff from a friend on Facebook that says that he's walking down the street in Tel Aviv, which is supposed to be a left center, and a couple is walking, and he just heard this one line that the man says to the woman, well, it's obvious that the Hamas is starving them. And the woman says, obviously. So even now when they are starting to be aware of what is happening, because the pictures are like the big, the egg is breaking, There's like cracks in the walls of their how do I pronounce it?
The point Francesca made is very important, and for many real left people, Jewish real left people in Israel and outside of it, the instrumentalization of the Palestinians as the new enemy of the Jewish people is a part of the Israeli state and part of the Zionist idea, and it was needed from beginning on. And it's very easy to forget it when there's when things become violent. But this is sustained also in times of so-called peace. But we need to move on a little bit, I think, because we have a big interest in how you yourself in your work were being treated by Israeli state, by international powers to hide what is going on, to fight any need to fight against what Israel is doing. I mean, you became an example of that. Eliana, you want maybe to present the question in a way which is a little bit more clear.
But can I?
Yes, please.
Can I? Sorry, and again, I think this is very important, and this is a precious opportunity also for me to clarify something. I understand what Eliana is saying. In a sense, we are indoctrinated from birth, but don't. You shouldn't think that it's just you. I mean, I'm waking up right now. This has been a very difficult month because I'm closing a piece of investigation that has taken me months. I've had lawyers, investigative lawyers, a full team of researchers as never before, helping me unpack the economy of the occupation. So looking at how the military industry, the tech industry, the agro-business, tourism, good production, supply chain, universities, charities, all what I call the private corporate sector, which is not just private, because there are pension funds owned by states like Quebec or Norway, who believe to be friends of Palestine. I'm telling you, if these are friends, in a sense, this is the point that we need to understand. All of us are part of a system. I say this is not, when I look at how the economy of occupation has been transformed into an economy of genocide, is because there are people who have been profiting from the tragedy of the Israelis and the Palestinians. Because it didn't make sense, I'm not an economist, I'm married to an economist, so there has been a lot of discussion in my household, because I was saying, Max, the Israeli economy is going down, and he said, no, look at the stock exchange, keeps on going up. So why Israelis become poorer? Why the startup nation is sort of collapsing, but people get more and more? I mean, there are some people, some sectors, the tech industry and the military, who continue to go up. Because you understand, we are all pawns of a system, and it's racialized capitalism. And capitalism has entered a new stage. We hear it from Yanis Varoufakis and others. But this is why the only response to it is to wake up and see that ideology politics and identity politics are just what is needed to fuel animosity and conflict among us, so that Israelis can continue to sacrifice their lives, the Palestinians can continue to sacrifice their life. Of course, there is a history that needs to be unpacked, but today there are people who are profiting from it. So this is why I say we are all trained and indoctrinated to stay within the rails, the way we study, the way we apply the law, without ever questioning the history, without ever getting contaminated by other disciplines. It's because we need to be good servants of the system. And this is why I say this is time that could be revolutionary if we understand that we need to protect each other as humans beyond the system.
If we manage to break the propaganda machine that is working against us so strongly, not only in Israel, of course, mostly in Israel, but here in Germany,
let's stay with our state for a moment, because you're making it, I'm happy you're making it about a capitalistic system problem, but for us, I think, and especially for the Israeli public, it's important to hear those details of what happens when Francesca Albanese tries to do her job,
yes,
in protecting and documenting crimes that Israel did in Gaza in the last. So, Eliana,
you were banned from entering Israel, right?
Yeah. But I really want to explain to people, this is something that I've never told anyone with the details that I'm going to share with you.
That's why you're here.
No, because it has never happened, but people should understand, should know what propaganda in action means. So before even being appointed as a special rapporteur, when my name was considered and it would be clear that I could be one of those. Why? What had I done before? I've lived in Jerusalem for some years after working for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, dealing with a number of countries and a number of issues like protection mechanisms at the national level. Then I decided to come to and work with UNRWA, which now is totally demonized. But I've seen from within what is the Israeli propaganda against UNRWA. I worked with the U.S. government as an UNRWA lawyer in Gaza to look at the curricula. For 9 months, we have looked at all the curricula that UNRWA has, and the United States itself concluded that there was no incitement to anti-Semitism. No, actually, the UNRWA curriculum, it was incredible how it created the environment for kids to understand not only the dynamics of conflict, not only human rights, but also how to recognize domestic violence, for example, something that in a society that it's so oppressed, the blockade, and then the occupation, and then Hamas, and then also traditions. It was a very liberatory part of it. So this was my background. I've worked with UNRWA, and at a certain point I said enough, because I realized, when you are part of a humanitarian machinery that is on for decades, you should interrogate yourself as if you have not become part of the problem, because humanitarianism shouldn't be a band-aid aid in perpetuity. Humanitarianism should be there for a temporary purpose and then let people resume their life. The fact that it has not happened is because the question of Palestine has moved from being a political question to resolve in line with international law to a humanitarian issue to manage in perpetuity. And this is when I realized this, I moved out. I went to the United States. I said, look, I left a very good job, very well paid, the certainty to throw myself into I had two certainties. I couldn't live with the doubt of not being part of something that was 100% clear, 100% kosher, as we would say in Israel. And I had this feeling of hypocrisy that has started to percolate. And so I said, no. Then I went to the United States. I took 1 year off because I was also carrying the second precious thing, my first child, who by the way, wouldn't be here if it was for an Israeli doctor. So you see, my entanglement there is very, very deep. I don't think I've ever said it. It's very personal. But I mean, an Israeli doctor who assisted, I should clarify, who assisted me and my husband.
We have great doctors, Francesca.
Yeah, I didn't have an Israeli doctor, just to clarify. No, but it's it was so I left with Leila in my womb when Leila was, now it's a beautiful 12-year-old girl. I went to the United States, and this is when I joined the academia, and I started after a while. It took me a while, but I got convinced by a colleague of mine from UNRWA to write another book about Palestinian refugees in international law. Et voila, small book. It took almost 5 years of my life. So this is what I brought to the mandate. And even before being appointed, a friend of mine, who's an Israeli lawyer, said, Francesca, if you're appointed as a special rapporteur, you will never set foot there anymore in Palestine. I said, why? They will never let you go. No, but I am different. I'm really someone who brings together everyone, because this is what I am as a person. And this was before the genocide. The genocide has really killed something in my spirit, but I was a party person. I mean, someone who really enjoyed bringing things together, and I've done it through my work. So I said, no, we are going to open discussions. So I came to Jerusalem for the last time. It was in March 2022, and I met not just Palestinian civil society, but I actively looked for Israelis, saying, you have never engaged too much with this mandate, why? And one asked me, the then director of a very well-known and well-respected Israeli organization, said, what's your interest in working with us? Because we are part of the same. How can there be peace without Palestinians and Israelis advancing toward their own liberation from the structures of apartheid? So, and ever since, I've built a lot of relations with Israeli scholars, with Israeli human rights organizations. Things have changed after October 7, because all of a sudden, but however, I was preparing my visit to come to Israel and Palestine. I mean, I would have come to Israel because I wanted to meet with Israeli organizations who are also in Tel Aviv. But my mandate is just the occupied Palestinian territory. So Israel said she will never be allowed in, because Israel has never cooperated with this mandate. In the last 18 years, it has never allowed any special rapporteur.
Can I ask, who is Israel in that case? Where do you get this information from that you're not allowed to?
It's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, through the permanent mission of Israel at the United Nations. So I wrote to them and I said, look, I want to come and I want to visit the occupied Palestinian territory. And they didn't respond. So, and I heard, no, they will never let you go. And this is in the UN, business as usual. I'm not fine with business as usual. I'm not someone who takes no for an answer. So I started organizing with Palestinians and Israeli scholars, activists, human rights organizations, and I had a mission planned to the places where to go, with whom, and even, there was a very well-known, I will not name him, not to put him on the spot, but there was a very well-known Israeli scholar who said, but why do you want to engage with us? You will attract all criticism from the Palestinian community, from the BDS. And he had a point. I was not known yet, because they didn't know who I was in 2022. Yes, I had published a report, and so they said, be careful, because you don't want to alienate the Palestinian community. We can work together without you necessarily coming to places that are deemed controversial to the Palestinians. So you see, this sensitivity was already there. However, nothing of this happened, because while the Israeli government said that they were looking into, not looking, but they said if she wants to come, she needs to apply to come as everyone else. So I sent my passport and everything. Few days later, what happened? Big scandal on all Israeli newspapers and in the US that the special rapporteur is an anti-Semite because in 2014, while our army was had just finished killing over 2,000 people, including 500 children in Gaza. I cannot tell you how many colleagues and friends I lost during the war. I was holding my baby, in the US, and I wrote a letter supporting UNRWA and trying to raise funds for UNRWA. And I said, every nation is indignated apart from Europe, which is subjugated by its sense of guilt, because back then I was naive. I really thought that it was sense of guilt. Well, we are unable to feel guilt toward anyone as a collective. But then I said, and the US is subjugated by the Jewish lobby. Of course, this is an awful thing to say. Now I understand why. Because, first of all, you don't say this. There is a lot to unpack. And my ignorance let me use this thing, Jewish lobby. Today, I would say AIPAC. Because, and in any case, it's not just Jewish people who are against this. Yes, there are Jewish people, and that has nothing to do with Jewish. It's really Zionist, because there are many Jewish people who are against what Israel is doing, what has been doing, etc. But however, fine. I chose the wrong word, but I didn't mean anything wrong. And this is what I tried to argue. This is when Israeli scholars themselves have come to help. Say, Francesca, stay strong. Welcome to the club. If you start apologizing, they will mop the floor. The government will mop the floor with your face. And this is why this is where the special rapporteur that you have in front of you today was born, by talking to my late friend Alon Confino, who was an Israeli professor of Holocaust studies of Italian origins. We had become very, very good friends, and we really miss him. It was such a lighthouse. And he said, don't worry, you will survive, but you need to stay strong. You are into a very, very polarized context. You shine for your integrity. This is why we are with you. And stay strong, clarify your position, and go ahead with a straight spine. And this is what I've done ever since.
But
and of
still,
course,
you never got into Israel, into the Palestinian territory, because Israel actually has the power, the foreign ministry or the army or whatever, to prevent from a high-ranked UN official from entering Palestinian territories.
And if I understood right, all of the special rapporteurs were banned from Israel. So no special rapporteur to this.
Well, there are special rapporteurs that Israel cherishes very much. Those who are fine with, keeping the criticism of Israel low. There are not many,
Francesca,
these days.
If I want to move on, and please tell me if it's too personal, but we are very interested because of the story that just happened a few months ago with Germany, and because we have witnessed really in the Western propaganda. And because Israeli, to be honest, don't be offended, but Israel couldn't care less. Like, it's not like anyone hears your name in the Israeli newspaper. You're non-existent. But in Germany, you're very existent. And
no, I don't think so. Otherwise, there wouldn't be. No, look, it's been.
They are aware of you, but they don't have to deal with it in Israel.
There is an entire in Israel.
Yes.
Of course, Israel. No.
Let's speak about. I want to move to Europe. I want to move to Germany because you came here 2 months ago, and there was a really orchestrated campaign against you. You weren't allowed to speak where you were supposed to speak. The newspaper were full of unbelievable stories, and the internet was full of video of the anti-Semite Francesca Albanese. Every interview you give to the let's say popular media, they come with questions where you see they have they have an agenda, they're planning to kill your reputation, and still you manage to come to Germany. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about after 2 years of this crazy propaganda now, or maybe a little bit more from what you say. What is the mechanism? How does it work? And what happened when you came to Germany? If you can give a little bit details also to the people who came to hear you speak in Berlin at the end. What was behind all this story?
Yeah. So first of all, one of the things out of the box that I've been doing as a special rapporteur is that I accept invitations to go, for example, Australia. I've been in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, most countries in Europe. And interestingly, the first organizations to invite me are always Jewish. I just noticed I realized when I came to Germany. But however, what has happened, and this is why I say it's not true that of course, Israel as a state doesn't give a penny about anyone. But the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and there is another ministry that you have, the one for strategic affairs and anti-Semitism, what is it called?
Yes, there is something like that, but don't ask more.
Yeah, no, but again, they've been very active and they have an army of minions. I call them the minions around the world, this pro-Israel, but we shouldn't even be called pro-Israel, it's pro-apartheid. It's because you're Israelis too, and they keep on saying we shouldn't mix everything into these toxic combos. No, it's the pro-apartheid people, and they're even in the United Nations. They run a smear campaign against me that have stolen money. I mean, if there is one thing that could never be said about me is about appropriation of funds, because I'm even the book I wrote last year, and I shouldn't have. I gave everything to a charity, and this is the thing of not wanting to profit at all. For me, this is not a job. This is a call in life. I'm clearing my karma.
I have to think about Karim Khan when you're speaking now, because he was,
exactly.
I mean, we don't know the details. Maybe you probably know more than me if you're going around the UN. But you're confirming that my
sudden accusations rise up at certain moments.
But of course, look at Fatou Bensouda. I mean, Fatou Bensouda was smeared in the public domain and received death threats. I don't even want to open that chapter, also because I'm someone who takes life lightly, but it's been scary over here. I mean, in the beginning, I said, okay, I'm going to drive. I have 2 kids. I don't want to live with the police outside my door. What is this? I mean, I'm someone, it's not even a proper job, So it's been scary. But let's go to Germany, because it's such an exemplary case. So Germany is a place, I mean, they are my fellows, my cousins. We have done horrible things together, Italians and Germans, during history. So somewhat, I think, guys, I'm close to you. Let me tell you, as your southern cousin, how is my perspective? Maybe this will enrich things. So already before going to Germany, there was a huge campaign, Edo, as you say. This is the anti-Semite, of course, because you cannot criticize Israel. You cannot. And Germans have this ability of being like this. It's the Overton window. I don't know. It's like having a brain that functions as an Overton window. These are the elements that I've decided to look at. The context, the rest, whatever comes from outside that it affects my dogmas, I'm not listening.
It's not very different than other people's, as I see it. Israelis, Americans. It's not very different. Everybody chooses their... But Germany loves to love law.
The Germans have also been traumatized, because this is a nation that, in order to reclaim some space and dignity at the international level, had to break so badly with the awful past. It's awful what Germany has led. And it's clear that Germany led the extermination of the Jewish people and the Roma and Sinti and the disabled people and anyone, as our friend Ras Sigal tells us. The idea of the pure race was not conceived was not born with Hitler and didn't die with Hitler. And this is what I said in Germany that provoked a storm, but I will get to it. It was not about Hitler. It was about the history of Germany, the history of Germany and Germany's genocides. But however, so before coming, of course, there was this storm. Oh my God, this person, blah, blah, blah. And the Israeli ambassador I've been told by many, the Israeli ambassador has done this and that. But it was not just the Israeli ambassador. There was the mayor of Berlin, the police. The federal police wanted to arrest the special rapporteur. And why? Because the special rapporteur had said in public that Germany had committed 2 genocides in the span of little over than 30 years. Because before genociding the Jewish people and the Roma and Sinti and the other and the disabled people and others, it had genocided the Nama and the Herero people in Namibia. This is a historical truth. You cannot say that because otherwise you trivialize the Holocaust. How come?
Francesca, this is an important point. It's not about Germany denying what they did in Namibia. You're just not allowed to compare it to what happened to the Jews.
But I was not comparing.
I'm not saying you did. I'm just trying to explain how the German perceived it.
Yeah. No, but again, there is no possible. Am I going to compare the Rwanda genocide with the Bosnian genocide? No, they are different. But the genocide is, I say there are 2 things that people need to understand about genocide. Genocide is a unique crime that is committed against a people as such. The individuals doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you are a journalist or a scholar or a child or a doctor, doesn't matter. You, as member of that person, are responsible for something you don't even know. And if people took the time to read from the Nuremberg trials, what some officials answered when they were asked the question, but why were you killing them when they were reduced to total vulnerability? Because they were a threat. But the children, they would grow into a threat.
Exactly like it's happening now with the Israelis and Palestinians. It's the same argument that the people are using.
But this is the thing. This is also why the Tutsi were exterminated at all age. And this is why in Bosnia, I remember I grew up with these images of the Bosnians being slaughtered, and the images of the children were haunting. They continue to be haunting. So this is why I say I have these sensitivities and I don't care. So I said 2 things that created alarm. I said this, and then I said Israel has control over lives between the river and the sea. And the moment you say between the river and the sea, this is the Pavlovian reaction of a typical German who doesn't think, it just acts Pavlovian, bites. And guys, chill, like my daughter would say, chill, bro. Because I was really taking them into a deep discussion. I say, I'm Italian. I share part of this awful history of ours, but we cannot reject. We cannot close it in a box. It needs to live with us. We cannot forget what we have done and what we have done. It's the dehumanization of the other that leads to the killing of the others. When you don't see these people anymore as deserving to live, to breathe, to eat, to have a home, to have a roof on their head, to be cured. And today, I would like the Israelis to see what they've done in their complexity, the torture, again, of Palestinians in a network of torture centers, as Israeli human rights organizations have said. How life has been tormented. It's like if you imagine that the people is a body, is the entire Palestinian body that has been injured, spitting at, starved, killed, beaten. Come on, guys, when are you going to stop? You need to see what you're doing because it has happened to us before.
Francesca, just a moment. I want to stay in Germany because I was wondering, when you come as a UN official, did you get a chance, or I'm sure you wanted to meet with some German politicians in different ranks? Did any of them meet you?
This is interesting because I was in Germany in May 2024. So 2 months after publishing the genocide report, my Anatomy of Genocide report. And I met with government officials, with politicians, with think tanks, with civil society. Everyone wanted to meet with me, even to criticize, but people were coming. This time it was impossible to schedule meetings. Okay, the government is excused because there was the election time and so there was a transition. And to be honest, I will tell you what happened in Germany because it's telling and it's chilling. But after this, I've had the German officials calling me, apologizing because and again saying they realized what's happening to Germany. But the critical point is that this time I had 2 university lectures at Munich and the so-called Free University of Berlin were the ones Free University of Berlin, which canceled the talk. And one talk for me was critical, and it shows you what's at stake here. I've been working with Eyal Weizman, who's Israeli himself. He has left Israel. He's working at a great project, which is the organization he founded, Forensic Architecture, which has done so much good in a number of countries to unpack atrocities, including in Palestine. And I've worked very close to Eyal's organization. So we came together to present in Germany conditions of life calculated to destroy. He would speak from a forensic, factual perspective. I would speak from a factual, legal perspective. And this lecture was cancelled. And when it was cancelled from universities, and we moved it to another event, to another venue. Meanwhile, there was another popular event that people like you, Israelis who are in Germany, and German Jews, and Palestinian Germans, and others, normal Germans, ordinary Germans, bio-Germans, as someone calls them, wanted to come and talk about what's happening to Palestine, what's happening to Israel and Palestine. This event, this cultural event, was also not cancelled, but had to move. The venue was vandalized. The owner of the venue was threatened, and so the universities were threatened. By whom? What I know is that there were some ministers themselves connected to universities and culture. There was the Israeli ambassador orchestrating this campaign, this smear campaign, and there was the police. The police, and this has been abominable, the police called the United Nations to check on what was my status because they wanted to arrest me for having said
from the river to the sea,
trivialized the Shoah, and for having said from the river to the sea, which is anti-Semitic. Because the events eventually took place, the United Nations told them she has the rank of an ambassador. You cannot. She has diplomatic immunity. You cannot arrest her. If you do, it would be such a scandal. So it was not done one way.
So it's a shame that they didn't do it. Maybe it would have done.
I was scared.
That's very nice.
I don't want to. I'm not. This is why I don't have the courage that activists have. I'm just a lawyer. I wanted to go back to my family the day after, But however, I go to the first venue, which was a Junge Welt, a newspaper who hosted us. The room was small. There were people packed outside the venue. But what was interesting, the police. There were police vans and police in riot gears outside, inside, with weapons. There was stormed. I mean, I said, what is this? It looked at it, when there is a derby match at a stadium, and say this is to have there was a special rapporteur, a doctor, a musician, Michael Barenboim, and Eyal Weizman, with Jewish organizations and German Palestinian organizations. That was it. So this was the climate.
Welcome to Germany.
And this time, and this same thing in Munich. In Munich, the university talk was moved to a refugee house, closed door. No one takes picture with the special rapporteurs because it's scary. And this is the thing. Last year, people received me. This year, people were scared. Why? Because of the repression. The system has repressed anti-apartheid activism because it endangers the system. You should look at the universities, how much of their budget comes from the defense sector. Is connected to business with Israel. This is the thing. This is why I say it's a system that we need to see It's capitalism and capitalist interests and make all of us disposable, all of us silenceable.
Okay, Francesca, this is a huge theme, but we discovered a few details which we're very happy to. I want to move, if you don't mind, to speak a little bit about genocide, because this is very important and relevant for especially for our Israeli listeners, who still, I think, at least in the Israeli discussion, this word is still not really, or this fact is still not being acknowledged. Like you said before, the destruction in Gaza, in a sense, is still not being acknowledged, although you hear more voices in the liberal left who are now opposing the war.
If I may say something, it is acknowledged from the right, from the extreme right, and the right, they say it very loudly, and the radical left says it loudly, and they're all both saying it from the beginning, but everyone in the middle is...
But I wanted to ask Francesca, because you mentioned your report, you're one of the first people who went out and wrote a report about it and spoke about it in many different medias and places. Like you said, I think it was March 24 already, that a genocide is happening in Gaza. And I want to ask you, at that time, what were your conclusions? How did you come to this? Why was it important at that moment, or you felt you could already say it?
No, first of all, I would like to clarify that I was not the first.
No, you weren't the first, but you have your.
No, but just to explain to you, because it's this is very important, because I also had my own biases. I remember when Ras Sigal wrote that article.
Very early you wrote it.
About, this is a textbook case of genocide. I was skeptical. I said, because in my mind, the genocide was also about the means. I focused very much on the means, on what we would call the final solutions, the gas chambers, the concentration camps, the machetes, the mass rape and mass slaughter that we have seen in Bosnia. And no, when you then, my peers, there were some special rapporteurs who were saying, Francesca, they've said, human animals, and let's shut down the supply chain. This is the language used is genocidal. It calls for the destruction of a group as such, and even the way they talk about Hamas, it's full destruction, which is not something in line with international law. You can destroy an enemy militarily, but you cannot kill everyone that belong. Otherwise, because if this logic passes, then every Israeli soldier should become a target for doesn't matter if he's at work or not, if it's on duty or not. No, this is not how international law is being conceived to protect all of us. So in the beginning, I was skeptical. But then I remember I started talking to legal experts, to survivors from Rwanda, from Bosnia, reading what they were writing, their alarm, and also going back to study genocide, because of course I'd studied it, but was not my specialty. Thank God, I would say. And then I realized, really reading what genocide is. Genocide, it's a crime that you do not understand from the perspective of the perpetrator. Who's the perpetrator? And his motives do not matter. What matters is the determination to destroy the group as such, is from the skin of the victims that you understand whether it can be genocide, because it doesn't matter anymore who you are as an individual. It's the fact that you belong to a group as such. And what is genocide? From a legal point of view, genocide is a crime that consists of various, at least one of these crimes: acts of killing, creating conditions of life calculated to destroy, or infliction of severe bodily or mental harm, or taking measures preventing birth or transferring children. And when are these acts genocidal? When they are conducted with intent, meaning with the determination to destroy the group as such. And here is where things get murky in the political debate but not among lawyers, not among the human rights group, not among historians who have studied genocide. And it's not coincidence that Holocaust historians have come forward and documented this as, yet, sadly, it is genocide. And it's late. I mean, we should have prevented. So at the beginning, my calls were to prevent genocide, because in the Genocide Convention, there is an obligation to prevent. So you don't need for it to be completed. But let's go back to genocide, because I think it's very important. So people say, yeah, but Israel wants to just exterminate or get rid of Hamas, or wants to liberate the hostages. And in my report, my second report, because I wrote 2 reports on genocide. One is genocide one is anatomy of a genocide, where I say, I believe that there are reasonable grounds to say that Israel is committing acts of genocide. In the second, and I was saying Israel is using humanitarian camouflage, meaning Israel is saying that it's ordering evacuations of 1 million people in 24 hours. Otherwise, they would be deemed Hamas. Then they will become killable, without securing water, food, shelters, and also by bombing the areas where they've been moved, creating safe zones that then turn into death zones. All what I'm saying is documented. It's documented, including through acts that have come from Israeli soldiers. So I said, Israel is using humanitarian camouflage, is using the language of the law to justify the blatant erosion of the law. And because everyone has been deemed Hamas, not just the combatants, not just, but also those who have been working for the civilian administration, those who have worked in hospitals while Hamas was ruling. And Hamas has been ruling because it was convenient to Israel. How many times, I can tell you, the Palestinians have tried, especially the young Palestinians, to have elections, to have political change, and they're disimpressed because the Hamas was not the nice. I've been critical of Hamas since day one of my work as a special rapporteur. So this is why it's ironic that they say that I'm the spokesperson of Hamas, because this is absolutely not true. But here we are in another scenario. So, not just the political leaders have said everyone, there are no innocent civilians. Everyone has been cheering up. Everyone has been responsible for October 7. Let's forget that if you use this language, the 6,000 Palestinians who had been killed in Gaza over 15 years could feel the same, that Israelis are all responsible because unlike them, they do vote. Unlike them, they live in freedom. So if this cruel logic passes that everyone can become a target in this war, no one is safe. So during this period, I've tried to call people to reason and say, let's use wisdom, let's use compassion, because the Israelis are hurt. But the Israelis are being intoxicated to get into this genocidal mode. And it has happened. Recently, I saw, while Palestinians are starving in Gaza, where we see bodies of children turn into skeleton. And then I see sweets and treats in some bakeries in Israel say, starve them all. Guys, what's happening to you? This doesn't speak to the misery of the Palestinians. This speaks to the misery of the Israelis who do not see and do not empathize with the misery of the Palestinians. So, yeah, this is where a genocide has happened, because acts of killing, acts of torture, the Palestinians have been... life as when there is a breaking point where a people cannot exist as a people anymore. And in Gaza, the genocide has already happened. Gaza is gone. We need to heal Gaza, because this is really the most humane and healing thing that is left to do. But first, we need to de-radicalize a society that has been convinced that the Palestinians are a threat, including the children, and with the support and the complicity of Western governments.
But if international law is not going to take a stand at some stage, because since the beginning we've seen films of Israeli soldiers uploading the atrocities they are doing in Gaza, in the West Bank, what the settlers are doing, it's so well documented with thousands and thousands and thousands of terrible, terrible things. And I was going to say about something I saw last week of 2 Israeli soldiers sitting in a bus station in Israel, and the one is telling the other, whoa, man, it was like a video game. We put cans of food for them, and when they came to take them, we just shot them. Yeah. And still international law is silent, and still nothing...
No, Eliana, it's not international law. It's international politics. It's the system. This is the awful thing, that after the genocide of the Jews, we had the Genocide Convention, which was passed in order to activate that sense of humanity never again. And this is not what you're telling me that it's happening in Israel. I've seen it. I mean, I think I've been on record several times saying my job is difficult and is brutal. I mean, I managed to keep everything together. Sometimes I feel like exploding, because I'm not just exposed to the torment of the Palestinians. It's also having to see the evidence of what young people who are 18, 19, who look like the most decent person on earth, who clearly don't look like thugs. They behave like thugs, like sadistic thugs. The gender revealer, someone makes a home explode. You see the parts of the bodies of these people flying around. And this is a way a soldier found to announce to the world that his couple was expecting a boy. Or cheering for the killing of children. This is, again, as all genocides, even this is being documented.
Francesca, I have to ask, do you get exposed to things that normal media consumers are not getting exposed to? Do you know more about what's going on inside Gaza than because of the blockade and journalists not getting in? I'm sure you have personal connections there, but does the UN or foreign governors, do they know more than us actually about the real situation?
The thing is that for the past 20 months, I've done this every day of my life. I've probably had 5 or 7 days in which I had to stop, otherwise I would get sick. But I cannot tell you there are things that I know that others do not know. It's the quantity of things that I've been forced to see and know from the very beginning of this monstrosity. This is what is different, because I, like many others, I'm not the only one, but in the United Nations, I could tell you I've counted the massacres. No, now I've lost count. Honestly, I've lost count. But during between October 2023 and October 2024, I've counted the massacres. I've listed the massacres, and and of course I cannot be there in surplus, but there are ways to corroborate, to validate, to triangulate the information. And look, the crazy thing is that the Israeli army doesn't even deny these operations. When it killed 247 people in Nuseirat camp to set free 4 hostages, killed 247 people. It boasted about it. I cannot find another. It was.
That was when Noah Argamani was freed, and it was the happiest day in Israel since 7th of October.
Yeah, but this is why, because the life of Israelis is the only thing that matters to the Israelis, and I don't even think so to the fullest, because now it's becoming more and more extreme, because I do see the treatment. I've seen the treatment of the families of hostages, And I have so much pain for them because, of course, this is why I say political pawns. It's this, or how protesters they did the right thing. They went to the borders. I keep on saying, but it's something that makes me hopeful is happening, because even internationals keep on going to Rafah. Why do you go to Rafah? Rafah is the gate of the exodus that the Israeli governments are calling for. They are trying to bribe every country in the world to take Palestinians like if they were postal packages.
Can you tell us something about that? Do you know? Because this is all very mysteriously communicated in the media. Since when is the Israeli government been involved in discussions, in your opinion or knowledge, concerning moving Palestinians from Gaza in big numbers outside of it?
From the 1950s.
No, but I mean since this I know.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, I know. This is correct.
That.
This is correct. We have research about the 60s. It was amazing. They spoke about it and wrote about it and had ideas all the time. But now specifically,
it was called voluntary migration.
Yes.
But let me say that because people need to understand.
Please.
75% of the people in Gaza are not even from Gaza. Where are they from? They are from modern day Israel. And I know that this is something that for many Israelis say, no, but this is the past. Well, it's the past for you, not for them who have been living in what Eyal Weizman brilliantly calls the 1948 ghetto. Gaza has been a ghetto since 1948. This is why if we see that not through the lens of politics, it takes another color. But however, let's fast forward. When did I hear in the post 7th of October the first time?
Yes.
It was around the 12th or the 14th of October 2023. And this is when I wrote. This is where I understood what was happening. 1 week after October 7, I hear a former ambassador of Israel saying, but look, the Palestinians can leave, can go. They can go to Egypt. We will give them homes, schools, electricities, everything they need. On the 12th of October. Why? Why? And then this has been floated. 1 month later, it came out that a consulting firm connected to the prime minister had already started envisaging the restoration of the Gaza coastal area. And meanwhile, a partnership was, an agreement was stipulated between Israel and Eni, which is an Italian oil company, for the exploration of the underground, of the offshore Gaza reserves, which belong to the state of Palestine. So whatever it is, I mean, but still Gaza. And so, this is where I started to make up my mind. It's about this. And because I'm a scholar of Palestinian forced displacement, this is where I raised the alarm. Guys, I didn't even talk about genocide. I said, Israel, as in every instance of conflict and confusion under the fog of war, like in 1947-49 and in 1967, when 750,000 Palestinians and then 350,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced, respectively. So, 20 years apart and never allowed to return. Israel will try to advance the forced displacement of large numbers of people from Gaza. And this has
And how do you look at this news now that Trump is speaking with Libyan? I think what is your opinion about this? Is this something that could actually happen, or?
Look, everything can happen. Everything can happen. And there is one thing that is true, that it will be very difficult to resume life in Gaza, not just because the homes are destroyed, because Gaza is been ecocide. There is a level of pollutants, of contamination made of chemicals, unexploded ordnance, other poisons that have been used, the enormous waste unmanaged, the rotten bodies everywhere. I mean, the level the level of disaster that has been provoked in Gaza is unspeakable. So there are issues, but this is why I'm saying why these people have to be moved into another country. There have been discussions with African countries for months. At a certain point last year, I remember Israel was discussing with Chad and other Central African states. And so it's not new. It has been there. Israel wants to get, this government in particular, but a large portion of the society, and this is scary, sustains this, wants to get rid of the Palestinians.
But now you just mentioned that there is a real problem. There's a materialistic problem in Gaza. Life there for the next years, to keep life there of 2 million people would be very difficult. That means people like us, people who are looking for constructive solutions, need to start and speak about solutions which will do right by the Palestinians, not sending them to Libya and not even mentioning what this will involve later for Libya itself or Europe and whatever. But do you have a time even in your mind right now while trying to stop a genocide to think about where this could go, how this could go in a better direction when this nightmare is finally stopped?
If in Israel, people like you were the majority...
I'm not in Israel, by the way, and Eliana is also not in Israel, just that, we both live in Berlin. This is...
but there are people like you
there
in
are
Israel,
people like us, and they're becoming, I think, there are more than one thing. There's a lot of fear, and I think what you said before, that Israelis need to understand they have nothing to be afraid of, because people like you are not acting against them, but for them. And
no, but it is why I say my fear, if Israel continues this way, is that in not a long time, I will have to use my voice to protect Israelis, because the Israelis are planting the seeds for their destruction. And it's happening already, and not for Israelis from the Arabs. No one wants, seriously, guys, you're still believing that people want to slaughter you? No, look, you've been bombing Yemen and Iran and Baghdad and taking land from Syria now. What's going on? So in Lebanon, what has been done to Lebanon? This is another chapter of horror.
But Francesca, I'm sorry, that sounded a little bit too easy. Inside this whole momentum, which is being developed now for over 100 years, Israelis can look at reality and say, if we leave the question of who is responsible for this whole mess, there are many people in the Arab world who are against the Israeli country. There's also anti-Semitism of different sorts. It's not like they're completely paranoid. The problem is that everything...
No, I know.
When they do what they do in Gaza, it only becomes worse. That's the point.
I live in an Arab country, but this is the thing. There is never I've seen an opening. And again, I live in an Arab country, and I can tell you for sure there is a lot of animosity against Israelis. But there is, for the first time, a shift that, in a sense, people see anti-apartheid, anti-genocide, not just anti-genocide Israelis, anti-genocide Jews. And this is something that is provoking a cultural shift, which is, sometimes I say, it's incredible how enormous is the change that this is producing. But of course, I agree with you, and I don't want to oversimplify. I'm not saying, this is peace and love. And especially after what has been done in the past 19 months, it's not going to be peace and love. But there is a point where we need to draw a line. It's so symbolic that yesterday, there were so many people in the Netherlands wearing rent, because they really drew a line, and this is enough in the city, which is the capital of justice. And this message shall resonate, including in Israel. Now, I said, if people were anti-apartheid, anti-genocide in Israel, what I think would happen, first of all, the bombing would stop and resume dialogue and see how to help the Palestinians rebuild themselves. This is and again, I know that it sounds a fantasy, but there is no other way, because there is only more horror that is going to produce itself if the only way for the Israelis to live in peace is for them to believe that they have to get rid of the Palestinians in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, in the Gaza Strip. Also, look at what is happening in the West Bank. From October 2023, the assault on people, there are 1,000 Palestinians who have been killed in the West Bank alone. 1/5 of them are children. So what is this? This is predicated upon Israeli security, Jewish security. The cycle needs to be broken. So it doesn't matter what lays ahead. We will be, and this is how I think for myself, but we will be always the author of our life, and sometimes we have to decide just for the sake of good. I'm not going to continue this because this is a monstrosity and it needs to stop. Like living really for a concept of justice predicated at every step.
Francesca, then I want to ask you something from the point of view of activists, because what I've seen here in Germany since the beginning of this genocidal war on Gaza, the movement started very big. We started huge. We were thousands and thousands and thousands of people on the streets, and it was big. Mm-hmm. And I've seen the activists scene or solidarity movement just falling into little pieces, and people not cooperating with others because you're not as radical and your opinion on something is not quite so advanced as mine, and we are falling into despair. This is my personal, how do you say, Wahrnehmung, my personal impression of what's happening. And I feel that the activist movement, because we are the ones leading this, how do we not get completely, we're dying of despair slowly. This is my fear. So what is your advice to us? Practical advice to activists.
Yeah, look, on this one, I ask you to trust me, because I have this bird's eye positionality, like this bird's eye view. Because I've traveled across countries, I keep on staying connected to so many realities, and I do see common problems. But I also see how much this is advancing. The debate is shifting. And it's thanks to everyone who has protested. I know you might not see the difference because you are in the day-to-day struggle and you would like to see the results immediately. But this is not how history goes. When I was at university, I learned that there's a history history doesn't make jumps. Historia not facit saltum. History is a gradual process. Yes, there can be evolutions and revolutions, but even revolution, in order to make a revolution, you need extra energy, extra time. And this is why when I saw finally the Israelis reaching the crossing, it had been done before because there were rabbis, American rabbis led by Alissa Weiss, who try to do the same, but it's different when it's led by Israelis because there is something extremely liberatory for the Israelis themselves in taking responsibility for what is happening. The solution doesn't come only from outside, doesn't come only from inside. You were saying there are cracks in the wall. The cracks in the wall means that you see the light, and when you see the light, there is something that's opening. And the lights reunite. You are fighting from within, other people are fighting from outside, and we need to keep on fighting. And it's a fight, it's a non-violent fight. It's a fight of love. It's really love for humanity, love for life. And to all people who feel disheartened, depressed, this is normal. Of course, I mean, Gaza has turned into a meat grinder. You would be not normal if you didn't feel depressed. That's okay. But don't let that depression that rage to annihilate your sense of justice and your sense of commitment, because this is what you are needed. Every one of us is needed right now. And the reason why the movement has faded in Germany, but I think that it will resume, is because the repression has been the fiercest. I've never seen, look, and again, I've been living in countries where freedom of expression is not predicated and acted upon, is not protected. I've never seen such a thing like in Germany. I said, this is not Europe, but also the way I've been treated, the harassment from the police, the harassment at the airport. This is something that is exceptionally wrong, but needs to be stopped. And the more people see it, that it's happening to them, the more it becomes personal and they are pushed to act. But this is why, to all of you who have resisted, maybe you have shrunk in number, but not in vision and leadership. Keep doing that. Do that for yourself as an act of sanity. Do that as part of the society you have decided to live in, and do that for the Palestinians, and today for the Palestinians and the Israelis, because they all need us. So don't drop the ball right now.
Okay, this is very optimistic.
It's not optimistic.
No, it's not optimistic. I didn't mean optimistic. I just meant it's it gives us, in a sense, a better feeling. But you didn't answer my previous question, and I want to insist, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Because people are becoming more and more alarmed by the new Trump plans to move the Gaza Riviera to Libyan, for example. You know, you can build two rivers, one for the Palestinian Libyan, one for whoever stays in Gaza, obviously. And I wanted to ask you, you said yourself that the destruction is just too much. Life at that area will be very difficult. Are you involved in thinking or speaking, or is there anything going on between, let's say, constructive, positive groups of thought about solutions for the people in Gaza after this destruction will finally stop?
Edo, the reason why I'm going to give you a negative answer is that it's difficult to think of reconstruction while people keep on being slaughtered in the dozens and hundreds every day. I would like people to think that in between was it March 17, 18, when the Israel announced the breaking of the ceasefire and it would not return to the ceasefire, it has killed 600 people in 24 hours in Gaza. Excuse me, these are human beings as well. So and 600 people, and then there have been days where 200 people were killed. And then yesterday night, 30, there were 300 people killed last week in a matter of 48 hours. What is this? Whatever, now we need to stop the genocide. The priority is to stop the genocide, to stop this machinery, because it's not going to lead to anything good. And then, of course, the point, I will answer your question. There are two things. First of all, it is up to the people in Gaza to choose what they want to do. Not to Trump, not to Netanyahu, not to the Israelis. It's really to the people of Gaza. And I think the most humane gesture would be to open the crossing and let evacuees get into Israel.
Very good, yes.
Into Israel. This is the way forward. And I know that many Israelis don't want to hear that. But two things I was saying. This is the first one. The second is that after what Israel has done, putting the 1 million Palestinians in Gaza will foster orphans, amputated person, disconnected, traumatized. This is a recipe for disaster. And not because I think that the Palestinians are violent and wild, because had the Palestinians been violent and wild, the Israelis wouldn't have had a day of peace after the Nakba. So I think that the Palestinians have showed their peace and resilience all over, if you look at what the occupation has been for them. And then this is why I say you cannot keep on postponing the resolution. Israel keeps on wanting not to look into the mirror of the present and the past, and keeps on making the problem worse and worse and worse. But there is no solution, because Israel is not going to eliminate all the Palestinians, and it will not. It will not. It is to resolve its ideological problems with the Palestinians. It cannot survive as an apartheid state, nor inside Israel, nor inside the entirety of what was historical Palestine, meaning from the river to the sea. It cannot. Apartheid will not make Israelis live in peace and security.
You mentioned the global south at the beginning of the conversation. Are you surprised or maybe a little bit depressed or by the reaction of some of the Arab countries, which used to play, Hezbollah attacked Israel and Israel went into Lebanon, but the Egyptian case is quite bewildering. Palestinians don't seem to be able to look at Arab governments as they could have done in the first 25, 30 years of existence of the Israeli country. They're like completely alone. They thought during Oslo that Americans will help them. We see how that went right now. This is American money and American bombs who are falling on Gaza. Who is supposed to, everybody is failing them. You know what I mean? Where do you think their help could come from under these new conditions you described before?
Yeah, no, I don't think everyone is failing them. You can see the people standing against their own governments, the power, the elites, the oligarchs in the Arab region with more difficulties than in Europe or than in the West. But the West is turning more and more dictatorial, more and more illiberal. But this is why I say, until we have strength in our body and our land, air in our lands, let's drop everything to protect our freedoms. Because in these freedoms, there is also the freedom of the Israelis and the Palestinians, and vice versa. So look, I wrote, as I said, in the first book I wrote, there is a 110-page chapter that describes the status, treatments, arrival of Palestinians in the Arab world. And the title of the chapter is An Unsettling Solidarity. Arab countries have never been entirely in their entirety. There are countries who are more honestly supportive than others. Others have profited from the Palestinian tragedy, clearly. And this is documented by illustrious historians, including Israeli historians. So I will not elaborate upon that. But hypocrisy exists everywhere. Now we are at a time where technology allows us to be a global society, globally connected. And it's a good thing that, I tell students in the Western world, you are the best part of us, because I live in the global South. I live in an Arab country, and I hear also when I travel to Arab countries that actually the encampments in the US and Europe have been so inspiring to many. Say, they are putting so much at risk. This is what makes us see as one. People dropping their privilege, renouncing their privilege to fight for a cause that doesn't concern them. Of course, it concerns them because it's about humanity. This is the interconnectedness that we need to see. So I'm saying, yes, there is a betrayal from states. Is it new? No. This is the United Nations that has inherited, that still suffers the legacy of the colonial world order that created it. And in a way, we close the circle also because I need to go. This is a moment for revolution and reform. Let it be peaceful, but let it be radical. And in order in order for this to happen, people need to see people need to understand, to see themselves in the other. And this might sound very philosophical, but hey, look at what has happened in the past days. There are some scenes that are so telling. The young guy who shouts, the student who shouts at the Eurovision, Free Palestine, and he's beaten and aggressed, and his mouth is covered. In the Netherlands, another activist has been arrested yesterday. She was shouting Free Palestine and her mouth was covered. Saying Free Palestine today is considered a threat. A threat to what? It's a threat to the system that is gaining and profiting from perpetual war and perpetual instability. And if we do not reject the system will continue to eaten us up. You need to look, I ask people to look at or rewatch the movie The Matrix to have a little bit of a sense of an allegory of what is happening. We need to wake up, because if we wake up and we see what really matters for us as humans, probably we will get out of this mess and to a better place. I'm not optimistic. I'm probably just being...
not in our lifetime, maybe, but
yes, it's true in our life.
But it will happen. It has to happen. It is...
Yeah, it is to happen for our children, if not for us. For our friends' children, our brothers and sisters, It
will happen faster than we think. Francesca, we were trying to get you to speak with us for months now.
It was worth the wait.
It was very, very worth the wait. And I say it again, it's very important that people in Israel will hear your voice and your charisma, should also, I think people like you can really break into other people's hearts. And this is a huge problem now for the Israeli society. So if you get any other suggestions from Israeli people to have a chat, take it as a priority, because it's really important. You spoke about it yourself. That
I do. I've always done.
I know you do, but I am actually trying to encourage our listener to try and speak a little bit more with outside and people like Francesca.
Yeah, reach out to Francesca.
Exactly. Now you'll get millions of emails. I doubt it.
Well, I do normally threaten my life and that of my children in Hebrew.
Okay.
So, and I don't hold a grudge, you see? I'm still very, very peaceful.
Okay.
But
I hope we made up for it a little bit, for the threat on your lives.
It was a huge pleasure.
And mine, Eliana and Edo.
And inspiration, yeah? Because you are an optimistic.
I have the pessimism of the intellect and the optimism of the will. I don't think that there is, like Antonio Gramsci said, I don't think that there is a sentence that defines me more than this.
We couldn't finish up with a better person. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much.
But why are you finishing, guys? It's so cute.
No, we finished. No, this podcast, you mentioned Gramsci. This is the best word we can finish this episode with Francesca Albanese.
Tonino. Okay, all the best to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and shalom.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Bye.
Bye.